The colony of New Haven was a beacon of hope for humanity, a shining example of Earth's expansion into the stars. Located on a beautiful planet in the Epsilon system, New Haven had been a symbol of peace, prosperity, and technological progress. It was one of the first truly successful colonies established by Earth's space program, boasting vast cities, advanced farming systems, and research hubs dedicated to discovering the mysteries of the universe. Earth had placed its faith in this colony, sending its best and brightest to settle there. For years, New Haven thrived, far away from the chaos of Earth, with its inhabitants focusing on exploration, agriculture, and the pursuit of knowledge. However, that peace was shattered one morning when Earth's Central Command received the first warning. New Haven, the thriving colony, had gone silent. There were no communications, no updates, no signals at all. It was as if the entire colony had disappeared overnight. Earth's officials initially thought it might have been a technical failure or a short-term glitch in the communication systems. After all, these things happened from time to time. But as hours turned into days, the situation became more troubling. No one could reach the colony, not a single message, not a single response from any of the communication satellites orbiting the planet. It was unlike anything anyone had ever encountered. New Haven was a hub of technology. It had advanced systems that should have been able to withstand the harshest of conditions, including complete communications blackouts. And yet there was nothing. The fear began to settle in when the fleet that had been stationed near New Haven for defense purposes failed to report in as well. They had been tasked with monitoring the outer rim of the system, a precautionary measure against any unexpected events, and yet their silence echoed the same unsettling truth. New Haven was no longer there, or at least it wasn't the way they had left it. Days turned into a week, and by then, Earth's government had mobilized every resource at their disposal. Fleet commanders, military officials, and scientists were called into emergency sessions to figure out what had happened. The situation was growing dire, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The sudden disappearance of an entire colony without warning or explanation suggested something far worse than a mere technical malfunction. Something was out there, and it had struck without mercy. But the question remained, what had caused it? And more importantly, what if it happened again? General Kane, the leader of Earth's military fleet, was one of the first to arrive at the command center. Kane was known for his strategic genius and calm demeanor in the face of disaster. He had overseen countless military operations, but nothing of this magnitude. As he surveyed the reports coming in, his mind raced through the possibilities. He knew the risks of deep space exploration and colonization. He knew that dangers lurked in the vast expanse of the universe, hostile alien species, dangerous anomalies, even the unknown forces of nature. But this was different. This wasn't some random attack or a hostile alien force. It was something much more deliberate, much more calculated. The silence was its weapon, and it was terrifying. "Sir," a voice interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Harper, one of the top communications officers, stood at attention. "We've received a strange transmission." Kane turned his attention to the screen. It was a distorted message, crackling with static. The voice was faint, barely audible, but Kane could make out some of the words. "They're here. They're everywhere." Harper paused before speaking again. "The source is coming from New Haven's orbit, but we're not sure if it's an old recording or something new." Kane's heart skipped a beat. The message was unsettling, the words cryptic and alarming. He motioned for the tech team to enhance the transmission. After several moments, the static cleared, and the message played again, more clearly this time. "They're here. They're everywhere. They know we're here. They know you're coming. The end is inevitable. Leave now. Leave before it's too late." The transmission ended abruptly, and the screen flickered back to static. The room fell silent. No one knew exactly what to make of it. The message was clearly a warning, but a warning from whom? And why had it been sent in such a cryptic manner? Kane's mind was spinning. He had heard rumors of otherworldly forces in the far reaches of space, whispers of ancient races that lurked in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. But this was something different. This wasn't just a warning from some unknown species. It was a direct threat, and the message felt personal. Whoever or whatever had attacked New Haven knew humanity was coming. And they were waiting. Kane turned to Harper. "I want a full investigation on that transmission. Find out who sent it, and if possible, trace it to its source." "Yes, sir," Harper replied, quickly getting to work. The sense of dread in the room was palpable. The officials and scientists gathered around Kane all seemed to feel it. They knew that if this message was accurate, Earth was in danger. The disappearance of New Haven was not an isolated event. It was part of something larger, something far more terrifying. General Kane knew they had to act quickly, but the question was, how? What could they do against an enemy they knew so little about? The military council convened immediately, with Kane in the lead. There was no time to waste. New Haven was lost, and Earth's safety hung in the balance. The council debated over their options, their voices rising in urgency. Some suggested sending a rescue mission, but Kane quickly shot down that idea. A rescue mission meant sending a small fleet, and with nothing but silence from New Haven, it was clear that any attempt to approach could lead to disaster. Others suggested building up defenses on Earth, but Kane was not one to wait for the enemy to strike. He knew that waiting meant they were already too late. "We're going to need more than just a defensive plan," Kane said, his voice calm but filled with authority. "We need to find out who did this, and we need to make sure they know we're coming for them." Kane's plan was simple but dangerous. The human fleet, the largest military force ever assembled by Earth, would be mobilized. They would launch a full-scale investigation into the disappearance of New Haven. It wasn't just about retrieving survivors, if there were any. It was about sending a message. Humanity would not stand by while one of their own was destroyed. The attackers had made a grave mistake by underestimating Earth, and they would soon learn that humanity had more than just the will to fight. They had the power to survive. As the preparations for the fleet's launch began, Kane's thoughts drifted back to the strange message from New Haven. "They're everywhere." That phrase echoed in his mind, sending a shiver down his spine. What could it mean? Who was this enemy, and why had they destroyed New Haven? Kane couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much larger, something Earth might not be able to stop. The fleet was ready to move out. The massive warships, capable of annihilating entire fleets, were prepared to engage. But Kane knew that the true battle was not going to be fought in space. It was going to be fought in the heart of humanity itself. Was humanity ready for what awaited them? As the warships powered up their engines and began to make their way toward the Epsilon system, Kane couldn't help but wonder what they would find when they arrived. Would they find the answers they were looking for, or would they walk straight into a trap? And as the fleet entered the dark void of space, one thought weighed heavily on Kane's mind. What if the message was right? What if humanity had already made its first mistake by coming here? The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity's fight for survival had just begun. The fleet was ready. General Kane stood on the command bridge of the flagship, the Resolute, his gaze fixed on the holographic map that displayed the path to New Haven. The fleet, now mobilized and poised to strike, was unlike anything humanity had ever assembled. 700,000 warships, each one a testament to Earth's technological advancements, were lined up in perfect formation, prepared to journey into the unknown. Kane knew this mission would be their most dangerous yet. His mind was sharp, focused on the objective. Find out what had happened to New Haven. Retrieve any survivors, if there were any. And, if possible, ensure the attackers paid for their treachery. But there were no illusions here. This was not a mission of rescue. It was a mission of survival. He had heard the words in that eerie transmission. "They're everywhere," and knew the truth. Whoever, or whatever, had wiped out New Haven had no intention of stopping. Earth might be next. The fleet's engines hummed as they jumped into faster-than-light travel, heading towards the Epsilon system. As they made the jump, Kane's thoughts drifted to the strange transmission they had received. It was the only clue they had, and yet it raised more questions than answers. Who had sent it? Was it a warning? And why had it been so cryptic? There was no denying it now. The threat was real. Hours passed as the fleet traveled through the vast expanse of space. The time felt long, stretched thin by the weight of anticipation. Every officer aboard the Resolute understood the gravity of the situation. No one spoke much. There was nothing to say. They all had a sense of what was coming. This wasn't a battle they could win with sheer firepower alone. They needed answers. They needed to understand who or what was behind the attack. But every passing second brought them closer to an unknown danger. As they neared the Epsilon system, a cold chill seemed to settle over the fleet. The stars outside the ship flickered in a strange, unsettling manner. There was something wrong with this part of space, something unnatural. Kane could feel it in his bones, the oppressive sense that something watched them, hidden in the void. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and before them lay the Epsilon system. It was eerily silent. The once thriving New Haven colony, a symbol of human expansion, was gone. The planet, which had once been a vibrant hub of life, was now nothing more than a barren rock floating in space. No signs of life, no infrastructure, no trace of human habitation. It was as though the planet had never been settled at all. Kane's breath caught in his throat. He had expected destruction, but not this. The planet's surface was a blackened wasteland. The cities, the farms, the research facilities, they were all gone, reduced to nothing. Even the satellites that had once circled the planet had vanished. It was as if the planet had been erased from existence. The only thing left was the haunting silence. "Report," Kane ordered, his voice calm but tense. A young officer at the communication station quickly checked her readings. "General, there's nothing. No signs of energy. No life signals. It's like the planet's been completely wiped off the map." Kane clenched his fists. "And the fleet, the one stationed here for defense?" "No sign of them either, sir," the officer replied, her voice faltering. "It's as if everything around the planet simply disappeared." This was worse than they could have imagined. There was no debris from the cities, no wreckage from the warships, no sign of a struggle. It was as if New Haven and everything on it had been erased from reality itself. The unsettling message from the colony now seemed all too real. They're everywhere. Kane's mind raced. How could this happen? What kind of force could destroy an entire colony, an entire fleet, and leave no trace behind? He turned toward the tactical officer, a seasoned veteran named Commander Albright. "Can we detect anything? Anything at all?" Kane asked. Albright studied the readings for a moment, then shook his head. "Nothing, sir, but there's something strange, a distortion, a faint energy signature. It's almost like a ripple in space itself. Whatever did this may have used some kind of advanced weaponry, or perhaps even something beyond our understanding. The possibility of an unknown technology, something far beyond what humanity had developed, made Kane's stomach churn. This wasn't just a battle for territory. This was something much larger. Something had erased New Haven, and if they weren't careful, they could be next. Kane's voice was resolute. "We need to investigate further. Set a course to the last known location of New Haven's fleet. If there's any wreckage, any survivors, we need to find them." The fleet shifted course, the warships moving slowly through the empty expanse, scanning for any signs of the missing ships. The silence was oppressive, as if the entire system had been abandoned by time itself. Hours passed without a single piece of evidence, until, at last, one of the ships picked up a faint signal. It was coming from the outskirts of the system, far beyond New Haven's orbit. "General, we've got something," came the voice from one of the ships in the fleet. "It's faint, but we're picking up a distress signal. It's coming from an unknown source, just outside the system. Kane's heart skipped a beat. A distress signal. Was it from the missing fleet, or was it from something else? He ordered the fleet to change course immediately. As they moved toward the signal source, the tension aboard the ships became unbearable. Every officer, every crew member, knew that this could be a trap. The enemy, or whatever force had destroyed New Haven, could be lying in wait, but they couldn't turn back now. They had to find out what had happened. They had to know who had done this, and why. The fleet arrived at the coordinates of the distress signal, and what they found made Kane's blood run cold. Floating in the dark void of space was a lone ship, its hull battered and scorched. It was one of the ships that had been stationed at New Haven, but it had been severely damaged. The communication systems were down, and the engines were barely functioning. It was a ghost ship. Kane ordered a team to board the vessel and investigate. The air was thick with fear and anticipation as the team prepared to enter. As they made their way into the ship's main control room, the crew was met with an unsettling sight. The ship's interior was eerily quiet, the control panels flashing with static. But there was something else, a sense of presence, like they were not alone. As the team moved deeper into the ship, they found the crew, but they were not alive. Their bodies were frozen, stiff, as if caught in the middle of some horrific moment. The ship's captain, still strapped into his chair, stared ahead with wide, empty eyes. The rest of the crew was scattered throughout the ship, some at their stations, others in the halls, but all lifeless. It was clear that they had died, but the cause of death was a mystery. There were no signs of physical trauma, no wounds, no clear reason for their sudden demise. On the captain's console, there was a final, frantic message. They're here. They've already begun. There's no escape. They can hear us. They can see us. God help us. They are everywhere. Don't follow. The crew was silent as they stared at the message. What was this? What kind of force could cause this kind of death, this kind of terror? Kane's stomach churned with a growing sense of dread. The message confirmed his worst fear. The enemy they were facing was not only real, it was here, and it was beyond their comprehension. As the team returned to the Resolute, Kane's mind raced. Whoever, or whatever, had done this, they were no longer just a distant threat. They were already among them. The only question that remained was, how long until they reached Earth? The fleet had barely left the wreckage of the destroyed ship when the silence of deep space was shattered. A crackling alarm echoed throughout the flagship Resolute, and General Kane shot to his feet, his expression grim. "What is it?" Kane barked, his voice cold and commanding. A communications officer quickly turned to face him, her face pale. "Sir, we're receiving an incoming transmission. It's not from any of our ships or colonies. It's from somewhere else. It's strange." Kane's eyes narrowed. "Put it through." The voice that came through the comm was faint, almost unintelligible at first. It crackled with static, but Kane could still make out the words. The voice was distorted, electronic, as if it were speaking from beyond the stars themselves. "You should have stayed away. You've already lost. The time of humans is over. You can't stop what's coming." The transmission cut out abruptly, replaced by a barrage of high-pitched static. Kane's heart raced as the message echoed in his mind. This wasn't just a warning. It was a direct threat. They had made it clear. The enemy knew they were coming, and they were ready. "Get a team on this immediately," Kane ordered. "I want every possible attempt made to trace that signal." The communications officer nodded, working feverishly at her station. Moments passed, and then her voice came again, shaky. "Sir, I can't trace the source. It's not coming from any known coordinates. It's as if it's traveling through some kind of portal." Kane's face tightened. "A portal? You're telling me someone or something is using a rift in space itself to send messages?" The officer nodded again, confirming Kane's worst fear. It wasn't just technology. They were dealing with something far beyond Earth's current understanding. As the fleet continued its slow journey toward the last known position of New Haven, Kane stood at the helm, his thoughts racing. The unknown force had struck without warning, decimating an entire colony. Now, it seemed, they were closing in on Earth, and the cryptic message, "You've already lost," suggested that humanity had made a grave mistake in pursuing this conflict. The fleet's progress was slow, and Kane couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. There was no sign of any more enemy ships or forces. It was as if they were being led into the dark, only to find a force far more terrifying than they could comprehend. But there was no turning back. Earth was depending on them. Hours later, the fleet reached the outskirts of the system. The stars seemed to grow dimmer, the dark void of space becoming oppressive, as though the very fabric of the universe was warping around them. Kane's heart beat faster. He knew that they were close to something, but what? As they crossed into the edge of New Haven's former orbit, a terrifying realization struck Kane. There was nothing left. No planets, no moons, no debris. Nothing at all. It was as though the entire region had been erased. This wasn't just the work of a superweapon. It was something much more methodical. The attackers had not only destroyed New Haven, they had wiped the entire area off the map. This isn't just a colony we've lost," Kane muttered to himself, staring at the empty space ahead of them. "It's an entire system. A system we can never reclaim." He turned to Albright, who stood at his side. "What are we dealing with here?" Albright shook his head. "We still don't know, sir. But whatever it is, it's beyond anything we've ever faced. It's like they have the power to bend space itself." Kane's fists clenched. "We've never faced anything like this before, but Earth will fight. We can't let this force take us without a fight." "General, we've picked up something," came the voice of one of the ship's radar officers. Kane turned sharply. "Speak." "It's faint, but there's a large mass on the other side of the system. It's unlike anything we've ever seen before. It's moving." The words hung in the air. The enemy wasn't gone. They were here, hiding, waiting for the right moment to strike. "Set a course for the mass," Kane ordered. "Prepare for battle." The fleet shifted direction, heading towards the strange anomaly in space. As they drew closer, the mass began to reveal itself. It wasn't a planet, nor was it a ship. It was something else, a vast structure, an artificial object that stretched across the darkness like a gargantuan web. Hundreds of twisting tendrils of metal and energy reached out, seemingly alive, pulsing with an eerie alien rhythm. The entire fleet stopped in its tracks. No one spoke. The object was massive, bigger than anything humanity had ever encountered. It seemed to hover in space, its surface covered in strange markings, glowing with an otherworldly energy. The sheer size of it made the warships look like toys in comparison. Is that the weapon that destroyed New Haven?" one of the officers asked, his voice trembling. "We don't know yet," Kane replied, his voice steady, but filled with the weight of realization. "But we're about to find out." The fleet held its position, watching the massive structure with a mix of awe and fear. Kane knew they had come too far to turn back now, but every instinct screamed that this was a mistake. The object was clearly not a natural phenomenon. It was a weapon, or perhaps something even worse, and whoever or whatever had created it had been waiting for them. Without warning, the eerie hum of the object intensified, and the entire fleet shook as if struck by an invisible force. Alarms blared, and systems flickered. The object, whatever it was reacting. It was aware of their presence. "It's charging," the radar officer whispered in horror. "It's preparing something." Kane's eyes widened. They weren't just approaching the enemy. They were walking into a trap, one that had been set specifically for them. The feeling of dread grew stronger by the second, and Kane realized that their greatest mistake had been underestimating the enemy. They were not just attacking to conquer. They were attacking to wipe out humanity, to erase them from existence. And it was working. "Brace for impact," Kane shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Prepare for a full-scale assault. All ships, arm your weapons." But even as the fleet powered up their weapons, Kane knew in his heart that this might be the last stand for humanity. The object in front of them was no ordinary weapon. It was something that could obliterate everything they had worked for. And if they couldn't stop it now, Earth's future would be lost forever. As the massive structure's lights flickered and grew brighter, Kane's mind raced with one final thought. Would Earth's greatest defenders be enough to face this enemy, or would they be consumed by the darkness that had already wiped New Haven from existence? The giant alien structure pulsed with strange energy. It looked alive, like it was breathing in the cold silence of space. Inside the Resolute, General Kane stood still, his hands gripping the rail as he stared at the massive object in front of the fleet. His entire body was tense, his mind racing. This wasn't just a weapon. It was something else, something ancient and intelligent. The fleet floated silently, waiting for Kane's orders. All ships were at full battle readiness, weapons charged, shields up. But no one dared to make the first move. The alien structure hadn't attacked yet, but the energy readings were growing stronger with every second. Kane didn't know what they were dealing with, but one thing was clear: this was the source of New Haven's destruction. Suddenly, the object spoke. Not with sound, but with a transmission that hit every ship at once, beaming directly into their systems and into their minds. It wasn't a voice, not exactly. It was something deeper, like thoughts forced into the brain. "You came looking for answers. Now you will understand." Kane's eyes widened as the words echoed in his head. Officers on the bridge looked around in shock. Some clutched their heads, others stared blankly into space. Even the ship's AI systems began to flicker and glitch. It was as if the alien structure was speaking directly to everything, human, machine, and thought alike. And then the images began. The crew saw flashes of strange, nightmarish visions, entire planets crumbling into dust, alien fleets erased in seconds, suns going dark. They saw the rise and fall of civilizations millions of years old, all wiped out by the same force. The structure had done this before. It had existed for eons, hidden in the corners of the galaxy, waiting, watching. It was not a weapon of war. It was a machine of balance, designed by a long-dead race to remove chaos from the universe. Any species that reached a certain level of advancement became a target. Humanity had grown too fast. It had spread too far. And now it had been marked for deletion. Just like the others, Kane staggered, breathing hard. He gripped the rail tighter as the vision stopped. His voice came out hoarse, but firm. "This is some kind of extermination protocol. That thing, it doesn't attack out of hate. It erases life that reaches a certain point." Commander Albright wiped sweat from his brow. "It's not an enemy. It's a machine following rules. Cold, ancient rules." Kane nodded slowly. "And we just triggered it by expanding too far. By building New Haven." Suddenly, red lights flashed across the bridge. "General," an officer shouted, "the structure is activating again. It's building energy. We think it's preparing to fire." Kane didn't wait. "All ships, spread formation. Do not let that thing hit us all at once. Prepare to return fire." The order was sent across the fleet, and within seconds, the massive human armada broke apart, spreading across the battlefield. It was a beautiful but terrifying sight. Hundreds of thousands of warships forming a massive wall of steel and power across space. The alien structure pulsed again, and a wave of dark energy shot outward. It wasn't a beam. It was like space itself twisted, warping and tearing as it passed. Dozens of ships in the front line vanished instantly, not destroyed, just gone. No explosions, no wreckage, just silence. "They didn't even have time to scream," whispered one officer. Kane's voice cut through the horror. "Fire all batteries. Hit that thing with everything we've got." And then the war began. Laser cannons, plasma torpedoes, and ion pulses lit up the void. The human fleet unleashed its full power, filling the black space with light and fury. Explosions rippled across the alien structure as thousands of weapons found their marks. But the structure responded in kind. It didn't fight like a normal enemy. Its tendrils moved through space like they were alive, slicing through ships, tearing metal like paper. It bent gravity, folded light, and launched invisible waves of force that crushed entire cruisers. Every second, more ships fell. But humanity didn't stop. It pushed forward, one warship at a time. On the Resolute, Kane watched the battle unfold. He felt the losses like a weight on his chest, but he couldn't afford to stop. Redirect power to forward shields. Keep us moving. Albright turned to him. Sir, at this rate, we can't win. We'll lose too many ships before we even make a dent. We have to buy time, Kane replied. There has to be a weakness. Everything has a weakness. And then it appeared. In the middle of the alien structure, hidden beneath the pulsing lights and shifting plates, was a glowing core. It was small, but it pulsed in perfect rhythm with the attacks. A central processor, a power source. Target that core, Kane shouted. Focus all firepower on that point. Across the fleet, human ships adjusted their aim. Hundreds of beams, missiles, and projectiles were directed at the tiny weak spot. At first, it looked like nothing happened. But then, the structure paused. Its tendrils froze. The pulsing slowed. It's working, shouted Albright. We're hurting it. Suddenly, the structure screamed. Not with sound, but with a wave of pure energy. It lashed out in all directions, striking dozens of ships at once. The Resolute shook violently, its shields nearly collapsing. Sparks flew across the bridge as panels exploded and alarms blared. We can't take another hit like that, an engineer cried. Hold the line. Kane barked. Keep firing. With desperate fury, the human fleet poured everything it had into the alien core. The structure began to crack, its smooth surface now splitting, leaking strange purple energy. Chunks of its tendrils were falling off, spinning through space like broken limbs. Kane could feel it. The end was near, one way or another. The alien voice returned, weaker now. You defy the order. You bring chaos. You will fall with the others. Kane stepped forward, his voice full of defiance. We're not like the others. We fight. We survive. And we protect what's ours. With one final command, he ordered the fleet to charge. The surviving ships accelerated, their engines blazing, their weapons glowing white-hot. They pushed past the tendrils, through the waves of dark energy, and reached the heart of the enemy. And then, a massive explosion tore through the alien structure. A blinding white light filled the system, and the creature machine let out one last silent scream before imploding into itself. Space shook. Time seemed to freeze. And then, it was over. The light faded. The structure was gone. Only small, glowing fragments floated where it had once stood. The battlefield was silent again. But the cost had been heavy. Of the 700,000 warships that had left Earth, only a fraction remained. Wreckage drifted everywhere, and emergency lights blinked across the fleet. The victory was real, but it had come at a terrible price. On the bridge of the Resolute, Kane stood quietly, staring into the emptiness where the structure had been. Albright stepped beside him. We won, but was it worth it? Kane didn't answer at first. His eyes were locked on the stars. Finally, he said, we saved Earth. We sent a message. Humanity doesn't run. And though they were battered, and many lives had been lost, the surviving fleet slowly turned back toward Earth, carrying with it a warning written in fire across the galaxy. If you strike at humanity, be ready to face the storm. The stars were quiet again. The battlefield where the greatest fleet in human history had stood was now filled with silence, broken ships, and drifting wreckage. The alien structure, the ancient, galaxy-wiping force, was gone, destroyed. Its pieces floated like ash in space, still glowing faintly, slowly fading into the dark. On board the Resolute, General Kane stood on the bridge, staring out the main viewing window. His uniform was burned at the shoulder. A small cut marked his cheek. But his eyes were sharp, focused, tired but steady. Around him, officers worked quietly, many with bandages, some moving with limps, others with haunted eyes. They had survived, but barely. Only about 90,000 warships remained from the original 700,000. The loss was beyond anything humanity had faced before. Whole divisions were gone, names erased in moments. Families would never see their sons and daughters again. But Earth was still alive. And for now, that was enough. Kane turned to Commander Albright. Status. Albright wiped his face, his hands shaking a little. Communications are back. Emergency beacons are active. Survivors across the fleet are stabilizing. But, sir, Earth hasn't responded yet. Kane's face tightened. The long-range communications had been damaged during the final assault. He had hoped Earth had seen the explosion, had known they'd won. But now a deep worry sat in his chest. "Get me anything," he said, "even static." A few moments later, a young officer turned toward him. "General, we've got something." The bridge went silent. Everyone turned. The voice came through the speakers, crackling, distorted, but it was unmistakable. "This is Earth Command. We received your signal. You did it. The enemy is gone. You saved us." The crew of the Resolute didn't cheer. They didn't clap or shout. They just sat back, some sighing, others wiping their eyes. It wasn't the time for celebration. It was the time for breathing again. They had stood at the edge of extinction and lived. Kane walked slowly to his chair and sat down. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a moment of silence, just to feel the weight of it all. They had fought something ancient, something no one understood, and they had won not with luck, but with unity, with sacrifice. Later that day, Kane stood before a camera on the ship's command deck. The message would be sent to Earth, and to every colony that remained. Every surviving officer stood behind him. Ships across the damaged fleet played it on loop. He spoke clearly, slowly, using words every human could understand. "This is General Kane, commander of the Resolute. We came to find New Haven. We found something else. Something deadly. Something that wanted us gone." He paused, the silence heavy. "We lost many. Too many. But humanity still stands. We are not perfect. We make mistakes. We fight with each other. But when the universe rises to wipe us away, we don't kneel. We don't run. We rise together." He looked directly into the camera. "To those who tried to erase us, you failed. And to anyone else watching, to any enemy hiding in the stars, remember this: a single colony was lost, and humanity launched 700,000 warships. We are not weak. We are not alone. And we are not afraid." The message was sent. Across the galaxy, it echoed like thunder in the silence of space. Back on Earth, people gathered in every city, every outpost, every moonbase. Giant screens showed the fleet's return. The ships came through the atmosphere one by one, scared but strong. Crowds cried as names were read. Families hugged each other tightly, some in joy, others in tears. Kane stood before the Earth Council, who had feared the worst. They greeted him not with speeches, but with silence and respect. The fleet had been the largest, most expensive mission in human history, and it had not been in vain. "You've stopped something we didn't even know existed," the council leader said. "You gave humanity a second chance." Kane simply nodded. "Make sure we don't waste it." Years passed. Humanity changed. They didn't forget New Haven or the war. In schools, students learned the names of the fallen. New colonies were built, but now with caution. Scientists studied the fragments of the alien structure, trying to understand its origin. It was called the Eraser, a name that brought fear, but also pride, because Earth had erased it instead. Ships grew smarter. Defenses were built in deep space. Humanity became faster, stronger, and quieter. No longer shouting into the stars, but listening, watching, waiting. Then, one day, a signal came. It wasn't from Earth, not from any colony. It was from deep space, a small, trembling voice. "This is Virelon Station. We are under attack. Unknown enemy. Helpless." Kane, now older, now admiral, watched the message carefully. Behind him, Earth's newest fleet, twice the size of the last, stood ready. He looked at the stars once more, calm but prepared. "Get the ships ready," he said. "Looks like someone else didn't listen to the warning." The engines ignited. The stars lit up again. And once more, humanity went to war.